American diplomats from Kyrgyzstan to Kazakhstan laid the groundwork for its establishment. So, this Gaza issue, somehow, will be resolved in a month or 2, 3 months. I don't know, God willing. May God help them. The situation isn't very bright. Well, when this plan was finalized, unfortunately, you may recall, joined the broadcast a year and a half ago. We were saying it wasn't possible, but as you said, either international military support will be provided so that, let me put it more drastically, Murat Bey will also benefit and keep quiet. Look at the 1967 borders. I'm evaluating it from a humanitarian perspective. An international military force could be Turkey, Egypt, Indonesia. I'm saying it openly, it could be Pakistan. Whether these 5 countries have a UN resolution or not, that part doesn't concern me. But if a military force isn't deployed along the 1967 borders, in 2 months we'll be lamenting the genocide that claimed the lives of at least 100,000 people. A military intervention is necessary in Israel. I say this clearly and unequivocally. Absolutely. If you don't intervene militarily with Israel, the method, form, and scheme are the responsibility of the decision makers. Unless a military intervention is undertaken, or even more clearly, if it can't be stopped with unofficial warfare techniques, well, guerrilla techniques, in 2 months, unfortunately, there will be no place called Gaza left. My point of difference is that we'll be discussing where construction companies are involved in this plan, where and what will be done. The truth is, I'm talking about regular warfare techniques. We need intervention.
Already talked about Iranian missiles, Israel's highly advanced missiles, but after October 7th, when they launched an attack on Gaza, Hussein Bey, the army, had no influence on the ground in the hot war. At this point, the soldiers were telling us that they were ambushed at the very point where those attacks, the attacks on the Gaza line, began. There's also Israeli footage. They can't land helicopters, they're suffering losses. So, today, the Gazans have militarily cornered Hamas in a tiny area. In other words, the genocide has already killed thousands. Hamas is still resisting and can thwart the Israeli army. How is this possible, especially in the Zeytun neighborhood? Yes, right where the massacres began. How is this possible? Can you explain it to us, step by step, militarily? It's still Hamas's resistance, its ability to ambush Israel. That's why a regular army is the result.
Now, Hamas's main power source, okay, as the representative of the 2.1 million people living there, as the leader, and Hamas is a political organization, but let's say it's armed base, what is it doing? We need to think of the mechanism they established in those underground tunnels as if they were paved roads. They supposedly destroyed all those tunnels. There's a tunnel under the hospital, that's why we hit it. There's a tunnel under the school, we destroyed it. Now, hitting those tunnels, hitting them, is a bit difficult. To hit those tunnels, you have to go into those tunnels and detonate them one by one from the inside. What does this mean? Israeli soldiers have to suffer a lot of casualties in between. Israel doesn't do this. Instead, the images were shared a while ago. They target selected targets from the air, even targets generated by artificial intelligence. So, it says, which area is different in this building? For example, in the northern part of Gaza, there are areas where underground water flows. The soil is soft. For example, the tunnel structure there is different in the welfare zone, compared to the ones on the Egyptian side. Yes, well, as you said, artificial intelligence is being used there now. They are taking X-rays of the underground. They are trying to walk through it. There are also color differences there. For example, imagine normal soil, but if there's a darker brown stripe, the AI knows that that area is being dug. It also says, the Israeli press is citing statements from Israeli military officials. First, Israel's greatest power in this invasion plan is its air force. With its air force, it's striking whatever targets it wants, including hospitals and schools. The justification for this is that it's using that artificial intelligence primarily there. Here, it says, Ahmed, one of the terrorists on my list, is inside this building. Have to enter that building and get soldiers in, and those soldiers have to go and find Ahmed. Instead, Israel opts for massacre. They bomb that building, where 100 people live, supposedly to find Ahmed. Thousands, a lot of people, are dying because of this. Around 65,000 Palestinians have been killed since October 7. What Israel is doing is actually mass murder. In other words, there's no such operation. For example, there's urban warfare. There are operations conducted in these settlements. If you recall trench warfare like the one we fought in Sur, what do you do there? At least, that's what we do in Turkey, where soldiers and security forces operate without harming the people living there, innocent people.
Specially trained soldiers do this?
Specially trained soldiers do it anyway, and you don't move very quickly there anymore. You spread it out over time, you conduct house-to-house searches, and you apprehend or eliminate those you consider terrorists. Israel doesn't do that now. It doesn't deal with them one by one. Look, they've destroyed all the buildings everywhere. The moment you start destroying all the buildings, you can't even get soldiers in there with aerial bombardment or tanks and artillery. To be able to bring soldiers in, you have to do something first. You have to establish safe zones. Right now, Gaza, as a city,
is being ambushed in the safe zone. In other words, Gaza is falling at the very point where it declared a safe zone. It's not completely safe anywhere. In other words, it hasn't been able to stop that activity. Plus,
if they can't enter those tunnels, if they can't destroy them, Gaza will never be safe for the Israeli army. They already know it won't be. So, let's say the Hamas militants in the tunnels, as they say, are planning to force the people living above to leave, or we will occupy Gaza City. Therefore, with migration movements like, leave this area, they will confine the Hamas-held area to the tunnels, perhaps using poisonous gas and chemical weapons, making the people living in those tunnels inhospitable. They will cause many people to die underground. None of these are impractical for Israel. Therefore, we may witness worse practices worldwide. You think they will be able to reach that point? Well, of course, Ms. Merman, there are 3 news reports in our press, the Arab press, or the Hebrew press. When we compile the details of these 3 news reports, we see that Israel is using Gaza and the people of Gaza as a laboratory in the field of artificial intelligence. For example, if you look very carefully in Gaza, you'll see some tall poles in the pictures or visuals, but these aren't lampposts. This is actually a facial recognition system placed by Israel. In other words, it creates a database that somehow archives the faces of everyone in the region and categorizes them as good, bad, positive, or negative. In that database, for example, when an Israeli tank comes in front of it in the dark of night, it automatically fires to destroy it, whether it's unmanned autonomous systems or Israeli army, civilian, military, or armed. It doesn't matter. Now, the point being criticized here is that the United States recently provided an M113 armored personnel carrier. But it's a strange vehicle. Normally, it would have an anti-aircraft gun or something else. For example, some of them have laser systems installed, but they're unmanned and autonomous. Well, what we'll probably see here is that they're saying 200,000 people have been reassigned. They're saying they've called them back.
Announced this today. National Security Minister Ben-Gvir. 100,000 more Israeli citizens.
Weapons. Weapons distributed to Russian citizens. Now, that militia is a matter of paramilitary power, but here, is it being distributed for personal security? Why is it being distributed? To expel one's people from their lands. In other words, the uprooting of olive trees in places where the Israeli army can't reach. The destruction of people's homes, the harassment and brutalization of Palestinians, the deportation, and this figure you mentioned, pay attention, Israel's colonists living in the newly established Jewish settlements and the gun licenses planned to be given to them. Because I saw before I came, the licenses planned to be given to the colonists in the newly established Jewish settlements, especially in the Jewish settlements, are a state, terror state, a separate mafia state. In other words, the state is also proof that there is no such thing as civilians in Israel. Israeli civilians, you, all your people, are armed to the teeth. As Mr. Meat said, if you say, go to that Palestinian's house, get down, get him out of his house, that's your house now, and you don't recognize any laws or regulations, as is the case here, then the entire Israeli population, as you call it, is no different from Israeli soldiers, and they become open targets. Naturally, there's no such thing as a civilian in Israel. As of today, there's no such thing as a civilian in Israel. They're armed to the teeth and bandits. It's truly a mafia state. American society, you know, the Wild West, where the Native Americans were annihilated and divided into camps. In fact, in these modern times, Israel is implementing the same system, the massacres committed against Native Americans, and they are now perpetrating against Palestinians. The fact that the area here is so small shows us that the method is no different. But the area is small, but in this tiny area, Israelis are arming their own citizens or telling their soldiers that human rights laws now apply, and you can shoot to target them. You might as well be taken prisoner, or you might kill yourself. For example, come here and suspect us. He sees us as a threat. He's shooting us all. It doesn't matter if you're going to be shot or not, you get shot. I don't care. I risk getting shot. He hides behind that. The government says you're going to be ambushed or shot. You're going to have whoever's there shot. They say they won't hold you accountable. Then that could always be the justification for this. They're already doing it, so do something legal now. The person I call a Jewish settler isn't normally an Israeli soldier anyway. They go into a Palestinian village. The armed group says this place is now ours. If you resist, you'll be slaughtered. You don't go to court or anything. You're not prosecuted in any way. Naturally, you, as a whole, are bandits from head to toe. You are bandits.
Reinstated the Hannibal Protocol on Friday.
Oh, the Hannibal Protocol. And then there's this. If the Israeli army realizes its own soldiers could be captured, it can execute them. In other words, They've now allowed the execution of their own soldiers. But this whole thing is creating a huge impact on the Jewish community. It will cause trauma. So, how do you win a war? I gave the example of Bosnia. Bosnia was a tiny Muslim region in the middle of Europe. Were you able to destroy it? You couldn't. Why wasn't it destroyed? Why wasn't it destroyed despite such a horrific genocide? Because you can't fight a war based on the will of one people. Population and displacement can be done this way. We did the same thing. You'd become two independent states, Turkey and Greece. Greece and Turkey later, after the War of Independence, said, "We're doing a population exchange." We said, "Let the Turks come here, let the Greeks go there." Population exchanges and displacements can be done between two states. Here, they're subjecting Palestinians to all-out genocide. So, they're trying to deport them. Who is they doing this with? Quote, "There's no authority." They're trying to do that with states through an exchange. It's not a relocation. It's not a move to a safer place. It doesn't mean you're going to your own country, a place where you can live more comfortably under your own authority. They don't recognize a place called Palestine. Naturally, they don't recognize the Palestinian people either. They don't see them as human beings. This isn't a relocation or anything like that. It's not an exchange. It's nothing. It's all-out genocide. We came to these lands. There was a state called Palestinian. Let's name it. There was a state called Palestinian here. It existed until 1948. The state of Palestine had a parliament. The state of Palestine had a flag. The state of Palestine had money. You came and destroyed it. You destroyed it with a United Nations resolution. You divided it and destroyed it with a United Nations resolution. Then you told the occupier you were a state. You told the people you were not human. This is what the United Nations has said. This is what has been seen as appropriate in Palestine to this day. Only one way out of this. You must say, look, Hamas is the legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. There's no other way. You may not be able to prevent the genocide from continuing, but you must say, just as Turkey has done, before the law, before international law, before world history, that you stand with the Palestinian people who are resisting honorably. You will record this in history. The entire Islamic world will say this. The entire free world will say this. Is there no other way to explain this from now on? Was it Hamas or this? Or is it Mahmoud Abbas who is being held captive? We must move past this. The fundamental thing that pains us is this. For nearly 3 years, the western part of Palestine has been destroyed. The Palestinians living in eastern Palestine are the same people, and they can't even demonstrate there. They can't even protest. People can't take to the streets in Ramallah or Jerusalem because our own brothers are being killed. They can't speak out. One side is already being destroyed in captivity. The other side is already enslaved. We must recognize this truth. We recognize the state of Palestine. We see it as a state. But the truth is, there really is no such state as Palestine. There's nothing there but the Palestinian people. Therefore, whoever holds authority, we must declare to the entire world that that authority is a state. And from the podium of the United Nations, all free people of the world must declare that Hamas is the representative of Palestine. Otherwise, this genocide will not stop.
Where are these images from?
Go on joint operations with Israeli police and arrest Palestinians. Are you a democratic leader? Mahmoud Abbas is the blackest example of Palestinian politics. We are. But there's a world that doesn't even accept Mahmoud Abbas. Look, they didn't give him a visa, as you know.
So, while they say they'll recognize Palestine, they say they'll recognize Mahmoud Abbas's government. And let's say there are Palestinians in Europe who don't accept Abbas. There have been complaints for a long time.
Yes, but there's this. They didn't allow Mahmoud Abbas to go to the US, as you know. He didn't come to us. France had said, we will recognize the state of Palestine. Quote, in other words, with Syria highlighting the state of Palestine at the United Nations General Assembly, something might have happened. If all of those administrations, especially in the Islamic world, but especially in most of the Arab world, are going to support Hamas to the extent of their subordinates, then, from a political perspective, neither a structure will emerge that will recognize Hamas, nor will a statelet emerge that will take Palestinian problems as its own. The leaders of some countries in the Islamic world have said, it's not my problem, it's too far away from me. If they're so sincere, let's say it openly from here. The United Nations is meeting in September. Then let's take Istanbul to support Palestine. And Palestinian leaders can come here with confidence. Do you think they can do this? They can't.
Want to say something? So, what I'm saying might sound a bit counterintuitive. But since I've always emphasized this on other issues, I want to emphasize it here as well. Israel's, Tel Aviv's, and Washington's stance on Hamas is very clear. Their stance on Hezbollah and Lebanon is very clear. But we always say this. These structures are organic. These structures are not artificial. The same goes for
Arab countries. They're pretty much on the same line.
Yes, but Arab countries, are burning as much space as crime. What are we always saying now? How can you raise your voice? Your voice is as strong as your independence. Now, for me, let's put aside all our knowledge of international relations. How many times in 23 months has Ankara pushed us at the Organization of Islamic Cooperation meetings? He said, come on, he said. No, with condemnation, he said. Concrete action. We need to do something. We're too late, he said. But the Prince of Saudi Arabia said it himself. He said Palestine is not his issue. Now, it means being Arab or Muslim there isn't really about being human. But I want to use the example of Hamas and Hezbollah. We talk a lot about names on this subject from time to time. Last summer, we talked about Mahmoud Abbas for a long time. They sometimes point to Hamas and Hezbollah, always bringing him up. So, France and Germany, out of fear, are always saying, let's not talk about Hamas and Hezbollah. Now, let's shed light on a truth for a minute. Let's say it in bold letters. Let's emphasize it. Let's shout it out loud. Palestine is bigger. It's bigger than every piece of Palestine left. It's bigger than individuals. It's bigger than organizations. It's bigger than structures. Millions of Palestinians live in this world. For us, Palestine means every single person, first and foremost. Because names can change, organizations can change. History is full of examples of this. Remember the last century. Remember, Professor, you give an example of 23 months. In 23 months, almost all of Hamas's senior members were murdered by Israel. Hamas is still able to continue its resistance. So, when we say Hamas, we're talking about the Palestinian resistance. This shows that there are people. Show that this is not some upstart. This is actually proof of what you're saying. And while I'm saying this, I'm not talking about Hamas or Hezbollah, or whatever, every organization that's being demonized in Washington's mind, in the UK's mind. I'm not ignoring them. On the contrary, I take my hat off to their struggle. Well, last August, when all the Hezbollah commanders were being killed, Israel couldn't just enter Lebanon as it pleased. It couldn't invade by land as it wanted. It was met with Hezbollah's resistance. The entire Israeli army. It had America, Britain, and a few European states behind it. But they don't pay much attention to those details because they want there to be no Palestinian cause. There's the Hamas terrorist organization. We need to get rid of Hezbollah in Lebanon. Why? Lebanon should be weak. There's a Lebanese army, but Hezbollah was hindering it. That's why they destroyed its entire structure, starting with Nasrallah. But Hezbollah in Lebanon has a base. It still has people. They blinded 4,000 people. They left them helpless. But there's still a Hezbollah in Lebanon.
But it's a parallel state structure.
Well, that's certainly separate.
Hamas is a chosen political party for the region. Don't use it as a metaphor for something different.
Washington's perspective, because the rhetoric of television and Washington completely matches these structures. Remember, these are structures, but
we don't have to believe them. It's hard to see it that way.
Definitely don't. If these structures were aligned with the US or Israel and the Jordanian government, they would be carried on their heads. They would receive weapons aid. Look at the YPG, PYD, SDF. Of course, they're terrorists too. They're terrorists too, in their eyes. Okay, so what's the difference? He's the terrorist who benefits them. Now he's the terrorist who opposes him. Therefore, we need to look at the ideal there, not their rhetoric. What matters to us is Palestine. Today, that's why he restarted these attacks, and I've reached a point where I'm fighting Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization. Is Israel saying Abu Ubaidah is dead to send the message that they killed another leader? An official acknowledgement from Hamas? It's demoralizing. I mean, of course. Israel
killed almost the entire Yemeni cabinet the other day. I mean, they weren't soldiers or anything like that, right before the eyes of the world. I mean, who were they? The Yemeni cabinet announced this. Well, I think the people who govern at least a part of it, the people who represent that people, were at a cabinet meeting before the eyes of the world. So, they killed all the ministers at once. Can such a brutal regime exist in such a world? There's no sound from the world. Either the people you killed weren't soldiers or anything like that, or you could be at war with Yemen. You massacred this country's entire cabinet. Houthis announced the prime minister. 12 of our high-ranking officials were killed. Ministers, namely, the foreign minister, the minister of agriculture, the minister of environment, the minister of tourism and culture. That's where the attacks are coming from, right? Yes.
From the south of the city. Yes. Yes. This is the capital. The attacks are coming from the Gulf region. He killed the prime minister, the cabinet secretary, the prime minister's private secretary, the minister of economy, industry, foreign affairs, agriculture and environment, culture and tourism, youth and sports, welfare and labor, justice, electricity, energy, water, and information. His entire cabinet. How much coverage did it receive in the global press?
Just a few lines. For example, if any Israeli minister had been killed by a missile fired from Yemen, all the world's television stations would be talking about it for days. Lives lost in the Marat accident. Is the blood of our people so cheap? So, there's a danger. Let me open a different perspective. Look, the real danger is this. Israel hasn't been able to launch any attacks on Yemen for a long time. Point out here, the point that caught my attention is this. If Israel receives intelligence involving so many people in a meeting, it means Israel has infiltrated Yemen. But these are in a secret tunnel or something. That's true. I'm talking about a different danger. These are secretive things. The state cabinet is holding meetings in an official state institution. You can't attack this place. You strike in a military manner. I don't know. You strike a place where there's been conflict, but you don't strike a place where a cabinet meeting is being held. So, there's a problem I'm trying to point out. A wave of assassinations is normal, but of course, even if Israel declared war, it couldn't do this. This isn't the case. If you do it, the same will be done to you. Then you won't call it a terrorist attack. So, if your leaders, your ambassadors, and your consuls are targeted around the world, you won't call it a terrorist attack. If the world doesn't call this a terrorist attack right now, any action against Israel's representatives worldwide is legitimate, and every action is legitimate. No one can say anything, but the two are different things. Today, in Yemen, I don't accept it. Let me say this, I don't accept the Houthis. In Yemen, I, as Murad Ozer, personally reject the Houthi government there. I say that the Houthi government there is backed by Iran. I've been here every day for 2 years. Every time I've been there, I've issued the harshest criticism of the Houthis. But ultimately, the Houthis were people who were brought to power by the people of that region with their own consent, and they were all civilians. If you consider it legitimate to massacre civilians, administrators, managers, and unarmed individuals in a horrific attack right before everyone's eyes, to massacre them right there in a building right before everyone's eyes, and if the entire world considers this normal, then no Israeli ambassador can be safe anywhere in the world. It's impossible. It shouldn't be. This is related to this. I'm not saying this because I support the Houthis. On the contrary, you're the one who knows best, right? We've discussed this issue many times, but it can't be this bad. Something this horrific can't be done. I mean, how can you do something like this? How can you attack civilians, civilian administrators? Not even during a war.
Do you remember Murad Bey? UNIFIL opened fire. Do you remember? There are also ambassadors of 30 European countries in the West Bank. Israel fired on the ambassadors. We always say, this is 23 months. I remember us counting 7 days a week, 14 days a week. The water runs out, the electricity runs out, the hospital runs out. I mean, we're stuck, we're exhausted, and no one asks that question anymore. What's going to stop Israel? Nothing can stop Israel. If America weren't behind it, Nasrallah said it would take 30 minutes. He said it had 30 minutes to do. Jordan would still protect Israel. Egypt would still be able to do something about its dependence and debt. Saudi Arabia would keep quiet because it's buying weapons. It's paying tribute to Washington. In other words, the terms of international relations are now hypocrisy and extortion. That's what he'll do on his trip. This insult at the White House has changed, and I can't even talk about international law anymore. So, as we know, he's absolutely right. If you show us the country in 3. Now, we're already pointing to it here, over the green, yellow, and blue, and look at this country's capital. But for a long time, we've been discussing this piece of land, these waters, due to the Houthi attacks at the Bab al-Mandeb Strait and the entrance to the Red Sea. The 16 most developed states in the world are regularly bombing this place for Israel and killing civilians. The Houthis say, you massacred civilians. The most developed countries are the Netherlands, Canada, and Australia. What are you doing supporting Israel? I don't know, that's a separate discussion, but this country is divided into 3. Now, the Houthis control this place, including the capital. It happened here. Murad Bey mentioned the attack, and as a result, the majority of a cabinet was massacred. They'll ask again, well, Houthi, meaning when it's in Yemen, it's not human. When it's in Palestine, it's not human. Well, according to them, when you die in Afghanistan or Iran, it's not human. When you die in Iraq, we're already used to it. It's not human. There's no such thing. Normalize this. When it comes to Ukraine, people are.
The technique Israel used was actually the same in the 12-day Iran-Israel war. It went in,
killed 1,100 people.
No. Well, it hit the top leadership of the Iranian army at the same time.
Yes.
Now, hitting that top leadership at the same time is no easy task. Look, they don't see the ministers here. I mean, they don't see them as civilians. After all, they see them as a group of people who carry out those missile attacks with human warfare. You know, they did the same thing to Hezbollah leaders. Hamas has no proper top leadership left now. It's constantly changing. Now, this policy Israel is implementing, if we look at it from a military perspective, or if they call it terrorism in quotation marks, or if they're doing something right in warfare, it's not that easy to achieve this.
But they're not doing it alone. Moscow isn't doing it. They're sieging this.
No, there's something like, for example, let's say Russia is behind Iran. No one is. No one is behind anyone else. If it had been Russia or China and prevented it, fine, that would have been Iran's success. Now, the fact that Israel is somehow attacking these is a success for Israel. From its
own public perspective.
actually attacking decision-making mechanisms. When it does, it's a success for the Houthis. It's not that the Houthis are terrorists. That's something else entirely. Look, yes, so, there are two working parties, and one party comes along. It destroys that entire team within your decision-making mechanism.
So, are you saying this? I don't understand. What about success? America, the countries behind Israel. Israel is pursuing a very correct and successful war policy from its own perspective. Keep it up. In my opinion, it's more successful. Look, is this what it's
thinking? Is it pragmatically looking at it this way? For example, there's something from a military perspective, or there's the five-ring theory in war. At the heart of this is leadership. Look, with every group or country Israel fights, the leadership mechanism is the
command level. It's
not a leadership mechanism. You put political leadership there. You put military command and control there. You put commanders there. No one is in that power center, but for example, Iran didn't go and hit Ali Hayman. Look, they're making distinctions there too. There are other things there. They say it's going to happen, but it hasn't hit yet. Would we be surprised? So, let's say it's hitting where it needs to hit. Because of that leadership mechanism. Even the US can't do this very well. Look, they work very hard for Al-Qaeda, like with Osama bin Laden. But sir, there's intelligence sharing from time to time. Sir, Osama bin Laden isn't the same as his facade. The official cabinet, official ministry, 1,000 other dimensions have already been discussed. War is not something that's happening everywhere from Afghanistan to Pakistan. The man is in the ministerial position. It's not intelligence success or anything like that. The success of establishing punishment is nothing to be trifled with. Wait a minute, can I object? ? But is this success in striking consistent with the laws of war? Is it consistent with international law? That's not it anyway. I will object to that.
I also objected to the 12-day war in June. What was shown to us? Donald Trump came out and blurted out something like this the first day. Israel, ours are doing well. No, whatever America has in its hands for 12 days is this. It's the Pentagon, these commanders, CENTCOM, money, support. Whatever it has always given, Israel did this with America for 12 days. When Fordon was hit, it didn't do it with America. Israel and America did it together for 12 days. Let's get to this. I just said, were the 16 states welfare guards operations regularly? The welfare guards have been here since December 2023, conducting a continuous bombing campaign against the Iran-backed Houthis. Strategic bombing. We occasionally cover this in the news with subtitles. Led by America. From Canada to Australia, from the Netherlands to Singapore, from France, who was in Germany. If 16 states write about welfare guardians, our audience will see that they are the world's largest democracies. Wait a minute. Israel is never alone. If these ministers were shot here, it's not just Israel's success. All the world's satellite telecommunications are in Israel's hands. The SIN reports are in Israel's hands. Commander, how many times did CENTCOM Kurilla come to Israel? Aircraft feeds were integrated in 23 months. That's why Israel has some successes. Well, let's talk about a separate program. But Israel is never alone. We're
not saying it's never alone. It's not alone, but Israel's success, for example, right now, then, this coalition's success is Israel's success. This coalition existed before Hamas's October 7th attack. This is not linked to Israel. We're talking about a structure that operates with the idea of ensuring the security of passage in the Red Sea. In other words, this coalition also existed against the piracy in Somalia. So, the existence of that coalition in the Indian Ocean is already to ensure the security of trade there. When these Iran-backed Houthis began attacking Israel, that is, after Hamas, Israel also launched counterattacks, or perhaps they paid someone from the Quds to have them killed. I don't know who's feeding whom, that's another story, but ultimately, Israel can launch an operation here, and the Houthis can go and attack Israel.
You think Israel killed Abu Ubaida? Since there's no official statement from Hamas, I'm asking again. It's coming from Israel.
Now, Abu Ubaida is something beyond just a name. Because that symbol is a symbol, try to target symbols as well. Have we seen Abu Ubaida's face? We have. Do we know his identity? There's
a video. Let's explore that too. Is it
Ahmed or Mehmet? Do you know what he is? He's not someone like Khalid Mashal or Ismail Hania.
No.
As of today, all of the Hillist people are Abu Ubaida. In other words, Abu Ubaida's martyrdom is not a success for Israel. It's not a success at all. Let me put it that way. They might have martyred Abu Ubaida today. Tomorrow, someone else will emerge. It will be Abu Ubaida. From that perspective, the martyrdom of Abu Ubaida is not a success for the terrorist state called Israel. Actually, what we were talking about earlier is this. Striking a building that exists right before everyone's eyes, a prime ministerial building, a cabinet of ministers, a place that's openly visible. I asked about it from that perspective. All the kids who are Ghazis, who have a symbol, a very important value, wanted to be Abu Ubaidah in interviews. Isn't that right? I mean, they were writing their names everywhere. Do you think that's part of the psychological warfare? From that perspective, it's really killing, but it's not just for morale, for destruction, but because it's something like this. Leadership has been the spokesman since the beginning. We know Abu Ubaidah as Hamas spokesman. Hamas's own spokesman. Look at their leaders like Khalid Mashal, Ismail Haniyeh, all of them, people whose faces everyone knows all over the world. Aren't they the ones who come and go from Turkey? None of those leaders felt the need to cover their faces. Why did Hamas feel the need to cover the face of its own spokesman? Because if he's martyred, another Abu will replace him, and Israel will never know. It will never know. In that respect, Abu Ubaidah's martyrdom will not benefit Israel at all. Indeed, this is the case. Look, I watched a video today in Turkey and Germany. A German woman says, "Peace be upon Abu Ubaidah." A German woman chants, "Peace be upon Abu Ubaidah. Strike Tel Aviv." Quote, a German woman says this. Today, all over the world, Israel was created by the Abu Ubaidahs with their own hands. This is not a success. It will never be successful for Israel. Besides, neither Al-Qassam nor Hamas are movements that thrive on the personalities of people. After all, if someone retires or something else happens to them, they are founded on the continuation of the movement. Now, for example, Israel is expecting a wave of assassinations against the Hamas leadership and other political figures, primarily in European countries, as well as in the Gulf countries. Secondly, there's Iraq in this Gaza equation we've never discussed before. We'll likely see another attack south of Baghdad, similar to the one we saw in Yemen, targeting Iranian-backed Shiite militias. We don't know. Well, it's not the same for Israel, but I mean it in this sense. For example, the death of Netanyahu or Ben-Gvir would be devastating for Israel. Of course, because the Palestinian and Israeli societies are not the same. Yes. For example, the death of 10,000 Israeli soldiers in this war means at least 1 million Israelis have fled abroad. And they have. So, look, there are currently 100,000 martyrs in Gaza, and not a single Gazan has expressed their desire to leave. But for Israel, what will win the war is what I mean by willpower. If the people are loyal to that land, they will never be defeated. If those living in Israel die there, like Ben-Gvir or Itamar, and God willing, they will, and they will die badly. Then see the outrage in Israeli society. How will they escape? They will look for someone crazy to escape. It's the same when Netanyahu is killed, and God willing, we will all see how horribly Netanyahu died. The Western world will claim that that act was a terrorist act, but we will know that our blood is no longer so cheap. We will tell the whole world about this.
Okay, Mr. Meat, let's finish.
The expectation is in that direction. So, there's a mistake in Israel's or the United States' interpretation of the movements in the Middle East. They have the mistaken belief that the movement will collapse with the removal of the leadership. But the movements here, armed or political, are not based on leadership or individuals. They haven't been able to understand this motivation. Despite all their occupations in the United States, numerous coups, they haven't been able to resolve this dynamic. They still haven't.
United States has been putting an invasion plan into motion for years in the Middle East, and there's been a saying like, well, we don't like it, but it's stuck in the Middle East swamp. It's never been able to understand its sociology, so it's always tried to make it wear the same shirt. Yes, it also failed there. Isn't it working on this issue at all? I mean, does it even want to?
Understand? That's a separate discussion. We're short on time, but I want to say this. All the criticism and insults directed at Israel today are more than deserved in England, France, Germany, England, and US President Trump. Today, when world leaders say something positive or negative about Palestine, or say something negative about Israel's ammunition, you won't hear anything about India in the Turkish or global media, for example, but India is one of Israel's biggest suppliers. Well, today, everyone's in the world media calling Israel a genocidal, Netanyahu, a murderer, blabbering, and bitching about it. But unfortunately, US President Trump is the murderer. Well, I don't hear anyone in the world media, but US President Trump and his administration are one of the biggest accomplices to the genocide in Gaza. If he completes his term, I hope he's found guilty of supporting war crimes. Which one wasn't? Wasn't it George Bush, or wasn't it his son Bush? Which one wasn't? All of them were war criminals. One destroyed Iraq, another destroyed Afghanistan. Which one was Obama? Not the other. They were all worse than each other. Yes. But we consider them a legitimate state, everyone else illegitimate. They can be killed immediately. The entire cabinet can be destroyed. Everyone is a terrorist. No, they should disappear. But before the eyes of the whole world, they're savage, backward, barbarian. But you, Putin, for example, are war criminals, aren't they? Why? They're war criminals because they invaded Ukrainian territory. Those who committed 1,000 times the crime he committed, well, they want to nominate themselves for the Nobel Prize. Can such a thing even happen? Can such a ridiculous world even exist?
Europe, yes.
were used to the European press. Well, there are articles and headlines praising the Turkish defense industry. There are slightly different, concerned messages about Greece. Well, a very important magazine in the United States also published an article titled, "Turkey will now change the balance in the region," regarding our submarines. While all this is happening,